The gates of hell have been opened, and that's why we're talking about my pick for the greatest Italian zombie film ever made, City of the Living Dead from 1980. Directed by Lucio Fulci, this is the first in his Gates of Hell trilogy, followed by The Beyond and The House by the Cemetery. Three movies that are not explicitly connected in terms of plot or anything like that, but are somewhat connected in themes, in recurring actors, in just an overall feel. A phenomenal trilogy, and I'm so excited to talk about the start of it. Welcome to the Cobweb channel, everybody. My name is Daniel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. This film started development because of the massive success of Zombie, otherwise known as Zombie 2 or Zombie Flesh Eaters. You know the film, it's the zombie fights a shark movie. That film was such a big success, so they went and created this one. And before we jump in, I just want to say that this is not going to be the kind of review that you might expect for a movie like this. Look, Italian zombie movies, they are absolutely bonkers, but I'm not going to sit here and just be like, oh, look at all this bonkers stuff. It's so crazy. Look at all the gore. No, we're going to dig into the plot of this movie and discuss why it's awesome. So we kick off in a cemetery, which is one of my favorite settings for a horror movie. Just love a good cemetery. Best I can find, this seems to be filmed in Midway Cemetery in Midway, Georgia. Even though this is an Italian film, a lot of it was filmed in Atlanta, Georgia. And it also kicks off the way all great films do, with the words starring Christopher George. God, I love Christopher George. More on him later. I'm so excited to talk about Christopher George. But we quickly cut over to New York with a seance going on, and that's where we're introduced to our true main character of this movie, Mary, who is a psychic medium who is played by Catriona MacColl, who is an English actress and was not super thrilled to be in a movie like this. She really wanted to be like a serious actress. She'd done a lot of work on stage, but she wasn't quite getting the success she wanted. But she did star in a Jacques Demy film called Lady Oscar. Talk about Oscar bait, right? Okay, that was a bad joke. Let's cut that. And she didn't want to do this movie because she thought the script seemed bad. It seemed like just a bunch of violence without much plot. Again, that's one of the things we're going to discount in this review right here. But her agent advised her to do it because he said nobody's going to see it anyway. And cut forward to all these years later, by far the thing she is the most known for is this film and the whole Gates of Hell trilogy. She's actually the lead in all of them. This is what put her on the map. And even though she still doesn't like these movies, she is very appreciative of them and of its fans. So that's very cool. But what's not cool is this seance is so intense, and right as we cut back to this cemetery and a priest walking through it hangs himself, she sees the City of the Dead.
I see the dead! City of the Dead!
And dies. Very sad that our lead kicked the bucket already. Now we get this great scene where this cop comes in and he's yelling at them all about how they're on drugs or something. I don't know, he's like a comic book version or something.
You're a comic book version, Sergeant.
Oh, yeah, he is. Look at that. And this lady starts talking about how the reason that Mary died, Catriona MacColl, is because of the Book of Enoch.
Enoch.
Yeah, Enoch. This poor girl is dead because of a book that was written 4,000 years ago.
Now, this is a good time to note that a major influence, the main influence on Fulci for this film was H.P. Lovecraft. When he wrote this film, he reread a lot of H.P. Lovecraft stuff, and he said he wanted to create a Lovecraftian atmosphere. I think he did a really good job, but we'll get to that later. But the Book of Enoch is actually something that Lovecraft mentioned in The Evil Clergyman, one of his stories, but it actually is a real religious text. It's an ancient Jewish apocalyptic text. Today, it's not recognized as canonical by pretty much any Christian or Jewish faction, but it's about a lot of pretty cool, creepy stuff like origins of demons, reasons why some angels fall, a moral defense of why the flood, Noah's Ark, was morally necessary. So you can see why H.P. Lovecraft wanted to include this thing in his story, and now it gets a shout out here, but gets a much less historical and interesting explanation here.
It contains man's first recorded description of his boundless mortal fear in the face of malice itself.
What?
Yeah, I don't know what that means, but we're gonna go with it.
In some other distant town, horrendously awful things are happening.
And we cut over to Dunwich, or Dunwich. You see, okay, this is the town, this is one of the main towns that Lovecraft used in a lot of his stories, particularly the Dunwich Horror or the Dunwich Horror. It seems like it could be pronounced a couple of different ways. I've always said Dunwich because that's how it's spelled, and if you watch the movie The Dunwich Horror, that's how they say it. I've had some English folks in my comment section tell me the English pronunciation is Dunwich. In this movie, they say it different ways. Most characters say Dunwich.
Dunwich ain't been the same.
Christopher George says Dunwich.
You know this Dunwich?
It's not even on the map.
It seems like anything goes. So I'm more comfortable with Dunwich. I guess I'll go with that. But yeah, that's one of the big Lovecraft towns. And that's where this movie primarily takes place. In the original version of the script, it was Salem. They still mention Salem a few times, but it's said in the movie that Dunwich was built on the remains of the original Salem. So any way you want to go, it's kind of both. There's Christopher George as a reporter.
You're right, I'm a journalist.
Okay, who is Christopher George? Where do I even begin? So he originally starred in a 1960s TV show called The Rat Patrol, which was it's like an action adventure show about soldiers during World War II. I think he actually won an Emmy for that. But I mean, I've never seen that show. You're shocked, I'm sure. But primarily, I know him as an actor in a ton of 70s and 80s cult movies, horror movies, just a lot of cool stuff. Pieces and Mortuary, both of which he starred with his real life wife, Linda Day George, Day of the Animals, Graduation Day, Enter the Ninja, and most importantly for me, Grizzly. Love Christopher George in Grizzly. Such a great actor. He died at a really young age at 52 in 1983. It was from a heart attack. He had some health problems because he was a very heavy smoker, primarily of cigars. You might be able to tell that. If you see him in any movie, he's got this really gravelly voice.
Isn't there a way that maybe you and I could come to a gentleman's agreement?
It sounds like he's a smoker, but it's an iconic voice now. I love it. So for the characters in the film, we've got Mary, sort of. We've got Peter, Christopher George, and now it's time to meet some other characters. We've got a therapist talking to one of his patients. She's talking about incest-related things. Isn't that fun?
Why did you choose the topic of incest?
And a very young girl bursts in, and at first I'm thinking she's his daughter, but no, she's his girlfriend. So I don't know. That's interesting. And she just kind of crashes their therapy session and just starts sitting down, hanging out. Very weird, but this guy is Jerry. He is played by Carlo Di Mejo. Unlike the other two actors we talked about, he is an Italian actor, and he appeared in several other Fulci films like House by the Cemetery and Manhattan Baby, at least. And now that they're established, it's time for the burial of Mary, and we go to these gravediggers who just have the greatest conversation of all time.
Saw a porno flick once where this guy got so carried away, he humped himself to death.
Peter shows up to question these guys. I guess he's doing some kind of a story about Mary.
You're right, I'm a journalist.
It's never really clear what it is or why it matters, but he just kind of hangs around asking people questions. But he's also very easily convinced to leave places.
Beat it before the sergeant comes out.
Okay, I'm leaving.
And I love that these gravediggers just decide to leave the grave half filled. Like they're just like, it's 5 o'clock, we're done, we're leaving. It's just nuts.
Hey, you're not gonna leave her like that, are you?
And now we get one of the most epic parts of this film. It's just iconic. It's so good, where Mary wakes up and she's starting to freak out in the coffin. She's scratching at it. And then we get this, kind of Hitchcockian suspense sequence where Peter maybe hears her, maybe not. He's starting to walk away. It's legit very suspenseful because, I don't think I'm alone in the fact that the idea of being buried alive is practically the most horrifying thing I can imagine. And you just want him to hear her so bad. And finally, right before she passes out, she lets out an epic, blood-curdling scream. And then Peter decides on the most insane way to get her out of here. He grabs a pickaxe and just starts hacking it into the coffin. Now, on one hand, I kind of understand why he's doing that, because if you've got like a half filled up grave, you need to get somebody out of there right away. And those coffins are usually pretty attached shut. It wouldn't be easy. It would not be easy to get her out of there, especially by himself. And he needs to get air in there as soon as possible because the movie makes it clear she's running out of air quickly. So he's got to break some holes in there. But the pickaxe is just coming down at her face. Catriona MacColl actually had a really hard time filming this sequence. A lot of people had a hard time filming a lot of different sequences in this movie. We'll get to that. It was so hard for her to keep her eyes open when this thing is coming down at her face. She just had a gut reaction to close. And Fulci got so frustrated, he got into the coffin himself, had them do it at his face, totally unflinching. I was like, there, I can do it, you can do it. And the image of her screaming there is just so awesome. What a moment. Now we finally get full explanation of the plot, that this priest hanging himself was an, unholy enough act that it opened a gate to hell. By the way, an alternate title of this film is The Gates of Hell. Also, its original title in the US was Twilight of the Dead, but Yeah, George Romero's people issued them a cease and desist order for that. A little too close to Dawn of the Dead. They didn't get away with it. But a gate of hell has been opened and it must be closed by All Saints Day. If it does not get closed by All Saints Day, then all the dead of the earth will rise from their graves and take over the world. It is an epic apocalyptic plot that's really, really interesting. Also, All Saints Day, if you don't know, is November 1st. And since this movie is a race against time leading up to November 1st, in a short amount of time, most of the film takes place on Halloween.
Halloween, Halloween, Halloween.
So you're not going to see any Halloween decorations in here. It may not be the best film to watch on Halloween, but it is a Halloween film. Now the doctor's young girlfriend is going to visit Bob, which is what she established in that earlier scene. And Bob just seems to be some kind of vagrant loser in the town. And I guess she's just trying to help him. It's not really clear what their relationship is, but there the priest shows up. And this is where we get the idea that the priest is going to be one of our big boogeymen of this movie. His ghost, he's going to be showing up and he's very, very creepy. And the main thing that our heroes need to do is destroy this priest's corpse. If they destroy him, they can close the gate to hell. But we're also kicking off here that this gate of hell being opened just means a lot of really horrifying, creepy things are going to be happening. And here he just shoves a bunch of guts in her face. It's absolutely disgusting. And because we don't have enough characters in this film, we're introduced to some more. It's a young couple making out in a car, which is a classic archetype for horror movies. The guy there is actually Michele Soavi, who would go on to direct movies like The Church, Cemetery Man, The Sect, fantastic Italian horror director, and he was an actor in a few other things. And it's here where we get our first truly disgusting moment of gore. And look, Fulci gets a reputation for just making gore-filled movies, but it's been a little while into this movie and there hasn't been a lot of true gore. So, I mean, he's showing some restraint. It's kind of a classier movie than he gets credit for. After they see an image of the hanged priest, again, super creepy, just seeing this thing is enough to make this girl spill her guts. I don't know, super cheesy joke. Vomit up her guts out of her mouth. Now, you can watch this scene in a couple of different ways. One, you can just say, oh, it's a gross out moment. It's bonkers. It's crazy. Isn't this a gory movie? You can just watch it on a surface level. But if you want to look a little bit under the surface, it points to what this movie really is, that it is good at creating a Lovecraftian atmosphere in terms of unexplainable horror. This movie is all about hell itself, the spiritual evil of hell itself coming out of an open gate and infecting everything. It is about true, pure evil infecting nature, the world, people. And seeing this priest and just what this gate has opened, it just creates unexplainable, horrific, horrifying things like all of your guts coming out of your mouth. Now, it is an incredible image and it feels like it goes on for a really long time. It's actually 45 seconds. I went ahead and timed it for the purpose of this review. So for 45 seconds, she's spitting up guts. This was a really difficult thing for this actress to film. She actually had to put fresh tripe or stomach from a sheep that was killed just an hour ago in her mouth, spit it out. She actually vomited on set having to do this. You know, one thing that just stuck out to me when I was learning more and more about this movie is that we horror fans, we like to look at our horror movies and say, hey, look, it's all fake. It's just make-believe. But some of these movies, especially these older ones, actors had to go through some horrible things to make these movies possible. And, you know, I'm not necessarily saying that it's wrong or anything like that. I'm not here to judge, but it took a lot out of people to make these movies. And you just kind of got to respect it. I think this is an incredible sequence. She kind of went through hell to make it happen. And mad respect. That's all I'm saying. Our friendly reporter, Peter, agrees to take Katerina to Dunwich so that they can kill this priest. And he's taking her because, I don't know, he wants to stop the apocalypse or she's just pretty. Either are good reasons.
I'll take you anywhere.
And for as much as I want to talk about how I really like the plot and the story in this film, and it doesn't get enough credit for that, there's this weird moment in the car where Peter starts talking about Adrian De Niro and how Adrian De Niro told him that he would find a girl buried alive, and he didn't believe him at the time. And she says, yes, De Niro knows a lot about so many things. He knows about the city of the dead. And I just sit here like, who is Adrian De Niro? Who are we talking about? He never shows up in the movie. He's never mentioned again. He's just this guy that just exists in the backstory of these people. Now, on one hand, it's kind of unfathomable to me that they didn't cut this out. Like, he was probably an original version of the script, got cut down. Why didn't you cut out this moment where they talk about him? That seems crazy to me.
Listen, when Adrian De Niro told me...
De Niro was aware of many things.
What?
But also, if you're just a big fan of this movie, it's just this little extra backstory. Who is this guy? It just kind of makes you think, make you wonder. You know, I love this movie, so just those little weird touches that make you question, it's pretty cool. But even though so much crazy stuff is going down, Mary really wants to stop for a snack.
Look, I'm not joking. I'm starved.
Hey, I get it. I get hangry too. Oh, look, that's Lucio Fulci himself as the doctor. Love seeing him in his movies. So great. Another great scare moment we get is with this kid who is the little brother of the psychiatrist's girlfriend who got killed by the priest. So his sister is dead, but he's looking out the window and all of a sudden the light brightens on his sister's dead, decomposed corpse's face. It's pretty horrifying, and it doesn't make any logical sense. Like, what is the light that is suddenly illuminating this thing? But I don't think it's about light. I think it's about her just appearing. This movie is a zombie movie. It fits in that subgenre, but it's so much more than just a zombie film. It's certainly not traditional. It has zombies that are far more supernatural, almost function more like ghosts, and it has other ghosts in the film, and it just feels like it's just a spiritual evil from hell, and it is just creating so much otherworldly terror, and you don't question the rules of it. You just understand it's beyond our comprehension. Lucio Fulci is beyond our comprehension. He's that good. That's what I'm saying. Oh yeah, we're back to the doctor again. And you know, he's not my favorite character in this. He's fine. I'm much more on the Mary and Peter train. I like them a lot better. But the doctor gets a call from his patient and she's freaking out about something scary that she saw.
Something very, very strange is happening.
And he calls her honey.
Be there in 10 minutes, honey.
Which is weird. Seems like it violates some kind of doctor-patient relationship. But he goes over there and they find a dead woman there who had a funeral just a couple of scenes before. So corpses that are supposed to be buried are suddenly appearing different places.
Well, I don't believe in the Twilight Zone.
That's your mistake, man. I 100% believe in the power of Rod Serling. One character I haven't been talking about too much, there are a lot of characters in this film, you may notice, is Bob, the vagrant that the girl was trying to help earlier. A lot of people in the town have been blaming a lot of the scary things that are happening around on Bob. He's kind of been on the run. And when he's trying to get help from one girl, the girl's dad comes out, Mr. Ross, and he's terrified that Bob is trying to hurt his daughter. It's just this automatic bigotry against him without any evidence. And he attacks this guy. And here's where we get our next super gory, probably, yeah, the most horrifying moment of gore in the film, even though it's technically not the most bloody for sure, but where Mr. Ross pushes Bob's head up against a drill. This is another thing that goes on for a long time, just waiting and waiting for this drill to come closer and closer. It reminds me a lot of the eyeball scene in Zombie. It very much just feels like Fulci was like, the eye thing worked in Zombie. I'm going to do something like that. But it's definitely something different enough. It's not just a copy paste. And when the drill goes in, I don't think I should show it to you because, come on, it's YouTube and that might be a little too gory. The effect is incredible. Like, I still watch it today and I'm like, obviously there's no CGI, it's fully practical, but it looks perfect. I mean, it looks seamless and it is horrifying. Like, it is an absolutely horrifying thing. Our heroes finally find the cemetery in Dunwich, or Dunwich once again, trying to find the priest's grave. And I just love how consistently chill and happy-go-lucky Christopher George is. I mean, Christopher George, he's just a charm factory. Just love that guy.
You're right, I'm a journalist.
But it's time for our Avengers meetup because there they meet Jerry. Now our characters are all coming together and they ask him if he knows where the priest's grave is, and he wants to know the story. So instead of them just going straight to the grave, they go back to this guy's apartment and explain the whole story. So now we're gonna have to hear a bunch of exposition about stuff we already know, them tell this guy the whole story.
That's the whole story.
Oh, no, they just skipped right over it. Just, okay, cool. And next up is another one of my favorite moments of just spiritual evil infecting nature in unexplainable ways. There's a maggot storm. A windy storm happens and blows maggots in on them. You may know that Italian horror films are a lot like Indiana Jones movies, where you've got to have a set piece with some kind of creepy crawly, like the spiders in The Beyond or rats in Inferno. It's rats in Inferno, right? And for this film, it's maggots, and this is not a special effect. They did this with 2 giant wind fans and 22 pounds of live maggots. Now, if you listen to the commentary track that Catriona McCall does on this Arrow Video Blu-ray, it's very interesting to hear her talk about this scene. I mean, she's like traumatized from it. And again, it goes to show you that we watch these horror movies and we say it's just all fake. It's not all fake. And some actors do go through some terrible things. She had these maggots blown on her. She was terrified leading up to it because she has something of a phobia about worms. She was crying and she goes in to do it. The makeup guy puts some kind of cream over her face to protect her. They glued her clothes to her skin tight so none would get in there. And she had maggots blown all over her. And she said she was so miserable. This haunted her in her nightmares for years. She had nightmares about this. And she said it was the only time when she did not feel respected by Lucio Fulci. She overall had a good relationship with him, but she said she felt like there was a certain glee that he was like enjoying this and her suffering. And she was pretty upset about it. So this is one of those things where like, incredible sequence. It is awesome to watch this. It's amazing. But man, they went through hell to make it happen. Then we get a scene where Emily, psychiatrist's girlfriend, that's her name, by the way, we get another good head grab. There's a lot of head grabs in this movie. A lot of the zombie kills are them grabbing the back of someone's head and squeezing the skull and brains out. That's a lot of strength right there. You put your hand back there and squeeze, like, that's some strong fingers. That's all I'm saying. Sandra, Jerry's patient, has been another character throughout this movie, and here she gets killed by a zombie. And here's where I'm really wishing that Jerry had just told them where the priest's grave was in the first place. They went and took care of it real quick, instead of going back to his place to hear the story, deal with a bunch of maggots. And now Sandra dies as a result. It really sucks for her.
Jerry! Jerry!
But it is now time for his confrontation with Emily, where he stares at her until she disappears. Okay.
Aren't telling me what's going on?
The dead are leaving their tombs.
I'm closing my doors till tomorrow morning, and I'm not opening for anybody.
Okay, this bartender, smartest guy in the movie. Well, it doesn't save him because now there's a big zombie attack on this bar. It's a great scene though. And it's time for our characters to go into the tomb. And I love a horror movie where characters have to go down into some kind of giant crypt. And I gotta say, this is one of the best examples of it. When they're going down into this crypt, it is like, it's a 10 out of 10. It's an 11 out of 10 level scary atmosphere. There are literally skeletal bodies hanging from the ceiling. Like, if you are into macabre imagery, it is amazing. Look, there's even a flying rat. There's a skeleton that pops out like it's, once again, Indiana Jones. And we get zombie Sandra with another head grab, and it's on Peter. It's on Christopher George. Christopher George does not make it out of this movie. Bums me out. I would have much rather them taken Jerry. I don't have anything against Jerry, but like, he's kind of boring. Chris George is my boy. Like, take anybody but him.
You're right, I'm a journalist.
And now we get one of the all-time greatest zombies rising from the grave sequence. I have said many times on this channel that one of my favorite things to see in a movie is zombies rising out of the grave. You got hands coming up. You've got them sitting up out of so many cobwebs, macabre imagery. This is 10 out of 10. This is 11 out of 10. This is amazing. There's the priest, and Jerry steps up and stabs him in the nuts. It's a weird place to go for. They were actually talking about this on the commentary with Catriona McCall. She was asked why did he stab him in the nuts? And she's just like, look, you want to hurt somebody, that's the place where you go, right? I can't argue with her. It sets the priest on fire and all the other zombies on fire as well. It's maybe not the greatest ending to this, that just stab him and everything bursts up in flames. But hey, the gate of hell supposedly closes if you destroy the priest, even though it technically is All Saints Day. So I think they did miss their deadline, which possibly contributes to the very end of the movie. But they all burn, and now our heroes are rising from their grave. They're coming out. And here's the ending. This is the ending that has been heavily debated among horror fans. Nobody really knows what it is. Like, literally nobody, I don't think, knows what it is. Where they see the kid. Remember Emily's kid brother? And they're all so happy. He runs to them. The day is saved. And then it gets scary. It gets slow motion. It freezes on a scream. And you get this weird cracking of the screen effect. and the movie's over. Now, some people say that the footage of the original ending got lost. There's even stories that somebody spilled coffee on it, so this was the best they could do without that footage. There's also some talk that the original ending was a happy ending, and then Fulci decided he didn't like that, and he did the best that he could to make it a downbeat ending with what he had. It's clear the end of this movie was created in the editing room. They did not like film an ending of this movie, at least not that they had. But if we want to put some kind of logic on it, maybe it's just about their trauma. Maybe they've just gone through so much that even though they've now reached happiness, they can't experience happiness anymore, and everything is terrifying because of what their eyes have beheld. I mean, when Mary sees zombie Sandra, her eyes literally start to bleed. Maybe there's something to that, but it doesn't make sense. That you can't get away from that. So let's rate City of the Dead. Now for atmosphere, I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. It is incredible. Now, true, not the entire movie is gothic atmosphere, but it always looks good. This is actually such a well-made, kind of classily made film. It looks great. It's not sleazy at all. Not that there's anything wrong with that, of course, not against it, but there's like no nudity. There's no sex to it whatsoever. It's very beautifully made, beautifully shot. It's like this very classily made film that just has this absolutely insane gore, which makes it very interesting, I think. So it's not just another Italian sleaze fest, you know, it does feel like something more, but it looks great through the whole thing. But the crypt stuff is really where it skyrockets, and every sequence with the zombies is extremely atmospheric. For characters, I'm going to give a 7 out of 10. I like these people, particularly Mary and Peter. Big fan of both those actors. I think they're both great in it. There's a ton of other characters, and in fact, the sheer volume of characters might actually decrease this category a little bit. I'm almost tempted to go to a 6 because there's just so many of them. But there's no one in here I dislike. I mean, Jerry, I could take or leave, but it's all about Mary and Peter for me. Just love them. For story, I'm also going to go a 7. I love the story of this film, that a priest hangs himself and this unholy act opens a gate of hell, and it's a race against time to close it again. It's great, but there are a lot of loose threads. There are things that don't really go anywhere. I think Adrian De Niro is probably the biggest one of them.
De Niro was aware of many things.
You know, these movies are never going to have perfect scripts, but I think this one is better than these kind of movies ever get credit for. But for scares, I'm going to go a 10. There are so many amazing set pieces. The drill, the guts, the maggots. The gore is great and incredibly well done. The effects are fantastic, but it's not just a gore movie. I think if you want to disparage this movie, you could say that, but I so strongly disagree, because there is suspense here. There is an otherworldly, evil, demonic almost atmosphere to it that causes dread. I think this movie's got a lot of different kinds of scares, right? It's got the gore, it's got the dread, it's got the suspense, it's got the just feeling of powerlessness up against an evil you can never understand. It's so great for that. So all in all, I'm going to bump this up to a 9 out of 10. This is my favorite Fulci film. This is my favorite Italian zombie film. I think it's amazing. So that's me, but what are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comments below. And do you want a review like this for The Beyond? I would also like to know your thoughts on that. And if you want to hang out with me more, you can check out this video right over here, or a bunch of other reviews that I've done. Anyway, I just appreciate you hanging out with me. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.